The silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind that buzzes in your ears when meaning has been stripped away. Maya Jensen sat in the front seat of her parked car, hands resting on the wheel, eyes fixed on the mirrored version of herself in the rear view. Outside, the sun beat down on the polished glass of a corporate tower, the kind that promised futures to people who belonged. Inside, her breath was steady, but her mind, sharp, disciplined, once the nerve center of battlefields half a world away, was unraveling. She had just been thanked. 4 words, empty, rehearsed, politely lethal. And now, in the hush that followed, she wasn't a veteran or an analyst. She wasn't anything at all. Just a shape in a suit, waiting to decide whether to keep fighting to be seen or to disappear on purpose. That moment, suspended in heat and silence, was where her war truly began. To see Maya is to see the epitome of calm precision. At 29, she carries herself with an unnerving stillness, her eyes missing nothing. She is the kind of person who enters a room and understands its dynamics before anyone has said a word. But to understand who she is, you have to picture a place few Americans will ever see. Imagine a room far from any desert or mountain battlefield, bathed in the cool, sterile glow of a dozen high-definition monitors. This was Maya's post for 4 years. She wasn't a pilot, but she flew missions every day. She was a top-tier sensor operator for the Air Force's drone program. Her world was a torrent of data streams, full-motion video, signals intelligence, thermal imaging, communications intercepts, all pouring into her workstation from a silent, winged predator, soaring tens of thousands of feet above a hostile landscape. Her job wasn't to pull a trigger. Her job was to think, to see, to synthesize chaos into clarity. Think of it as playing a dozen games of chess simultaneously, but if you misread a single move, people die. She had to distinguish a farmer with a hoe from an insurgent with a rifle from 5 miles away. She had to predict enemy movements based on the faintest electronic whispers. She had to sit for 10-hour shifts, fueled by caffeine and sheer force of will, maintaining absolute concentration while the lives of soldiers on the ground depended on her analysis. She was a high-tech warrior, a data fusion expert, a human supercomputer forged in the digital fires of modern warfare. When her enlistment ended, she left with a chest full of commendations and a mind sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. She returned to a civilian world that she believed was hungry for people with her skills. The tech sector, corporate intelligence, data analytics, they all advertised for candidates who could thrive under pressure, find patterns in noise, and make critical decisions. Maya wasn't just qualified, she was the blueprint. With a quiet confidence, she began applying for the high-level analyst positions she knew she was ready for. Her first interview was with a prestigious tech firm in Austin. She walked into the glass-walled conference room, her resume in the hand of a man named Henderson, a vice president with a slick watch and an easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He scanned her qualifications. His eyes and his entire demeanor changed the moment they landed on 2 words: U.S. Air Force. The professional curiosity in his face dissolved, replaced by a kind of folksy, patronizing warmth. He leaned back, the resume now resting forgotten on the table. "So, Air Force, huh?" Henderson said, his voice taking on a tone one might use with a child. "That's great. We love vets here. A lot of discipline." Maya kept her composure. "My experience in signals intelligence and multispectrum data fusion seems to align perfectly with the role's requirements." Henderson nodded, but he wasn't listening. He was looking at the idea of her, not the woman in front of him. "I bet. Must have been tough, you know, driving those big supply trucks around in all that heat." My nephew was in the army, drove a Humvee, said the sand gets everywhere. The insult was so profound, so dismissive, it was almost elegant in its ignorance. He had looked at a master of the digital realm and seen a truck driver. He had taken her years of high-stakes, life-or-death analytical combat and reduced it to a stereotype so lazy it was breathtaking. Maya's mind, the mind that could track a dozen variables in a fluid battle space, went momentarily blank. She tried to steer the conversation back, to explain the terabytes of data, the split-second decisions, but Henderson was already standing up, his hand outstretched. The interview was over. "Well, it was great to meet you, Maya," he said, his smile now wide and completely empty. "We've got a lot of candidates to see." And really, he added, his voice dripping with synthetic sincerity, "Thank you for your service." He held the door for her. As it clicked shut behind her, the silence of the hallway was deafening. Those 4 words, which she had once accepted with pride, now echoed in her ears as the most profound insult she had ever received. They were not a recognition of her service. They were a dismissal of her skill. It was a polite, patriotic pat on the head before showing her the door. It was the sound of a covenant being broken. This wasn't just a bad interview. For Maya, it was the inciting incident of a new undeclared war. Her mission was no longer overseas. It was right here, in the polished boardrooms of corporate America. Her conscious desire was now forged and razor-sharp. She needed to find a job that respected her skills. But a deeper, unconscious need was stirring. The need for justice, for a world that understood what her service truly meant. Maya's story is a reflection of a struggle many of our nation's best and brightest face every single day. It's the story of the master mechanic from the Navy's nuclear submarine program being asked if he's good with tools. It's the story of the Army intelligence sergeant with fluency in 3 languages being offered a job in warehouse security. It's the archetype of the unseen expert, a universal tale of having your deepest capabilities ignored because of a superficial label. Maya's journey is just beginning, and so is ours with you. If you believe these kinds of stories, the ones about the quiet injustices and the hidden battles, need a powerful voice, take a moment to click that subscribe button below. It's the most direct way to tell us you're here, you're listening, and you believe in this mission as much as we do. As Maya stood in that silent, sterile hallway, the hollow thanks of a man who saw nothing of her value ringing in her ears, she faced a turning point. The world had just shown her how it intended to define her. But what happens when the world refuses to see who you are? You are left with 2 choices. You can fade away into the role they've assigned you, or you can forge a mask and fight back on their terms. For Maya Jensen, the battle had just begun. The weight of a single experience can be heavy, but the weight of a pattern is crushing. After her interview with Henderson, Maya held on to a sliver of hope. Perhaps he was an anomaly, a single ignorant executive in a sea of enlightened employers. But the weeks that followed systematically dismantled that hope interview by humiliating interview. There was the woman at the financial services firm who, upon learning of her Air Force background, asked with wide-eyed curiosity, "Oh, so did you, get to jump out of planes? That must be a rush." Maya had calmly explained that her role was analytical, not airborne, but the woman's perception was already set in stone. She was an action figure, not an analyst. The interview ended with a breezy, "Thanks for your service." Then came the software company, where the all-male interview panel, upon seeing her military service, spent 10 minutes swapping stories about their own college ROTC days before asking her a single technical question. They didn't see a candidate. They saw a mascot for their own diluted nostalgia. The result was the same: a firm handshake, a polite smile. "We really appreciate your service." With each rejection, the phrase became more toxic. It was a verbal anesthetic, designed to numb the discomfort of the person saying it, not to honor the person hearing it. It was a convenient way to end a conversation, a way to feel patriotic while simultaneously dismissing the complex, living reality of the veteran standing before them. The pattern was undeniable. Her greatest professional asset, her unique and hard-won identity, was functioning as an anchor, pulling her down before she even had a chance to speak. The world wasn't just misunderstanding her service. It was using it as a pretext for professional laziness, a shortcut to put her in a box labeled "not a culture fit." This is the gap that defines so many stories of injustice, the chasm between what you expect and what the world delivers. As Robert McKee teaches, this gap is the engine of story. Maya expected her elite skills to be met with professional curiosity. Instead, they were met with the force of a deeply ingrained societal stereotype. Her life was in a state of imbalance, and the pressure was building. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon. She had just returned from another failed interview, the hollow thanks still ringing in her ears. She sat in her car, the engine off, staring at her own reflection in the rearview mirror. Who was that person? Was she the calm, confident expert who had commanded a digital battle space? Or was she the supplicant who had just been politely dismissed for the 6th time in a month? The frustration curdled into a cold, hard rage. It wasn't the explosive anger of a tantrum, but the focused, tactical anger of a strategist who realizes her current approach is a catastrophic failure. The system was broken. The front door was barred to her. If she couldn't get through it, she would have to find another way in. That evening, sitting before the glow of her laptop, Maya Jensen made a choice. It was a choice born of desperation, but executed with the precision of a military operation. It was a choice that felt like a betrayal, a compromise of the very core of who she was. She opened her resume file. Her finger hovered over the delete key. This document was more than a list of jobs. It was the story of her 20s. It was a testament to her dedication, her sacrifice, her achievement. The line, "United States Air Force, honorable discharge," was a source of immense pride. It was her. With a deep breath, she began to erase herself. Delete. The 4 years of service vanished. Delete. The commendations, the special training courses, the security clearance. All gone. In their place, she began to construct a ghost. She fabricated a 4-year stint at a mid-level government contractor, giving it a plausible-sounding name, North Star Geospatial Solutions. She populated it with bland, corporate-friendly bullet points, carefully translating her high-stakes military skills into the safe, sterile language of the civilian world. Managed multi-spectrum data fusion became oversaw cross-platform data integration. Provided real-time threat analysis for ground assets became delivered time-sensitive analytical support to key stakeholders. She was stripping the honor, the danger, and the truth from her experience, leaving only a hollow, marketable shell. The final document, which she saved as Maya Jensen Civilian.pdf, was a masterpiece of conformity. It was also a lie. She looked at the two files, side by side on her screen. One was the truth, a document that had gotten her nowhere. The other was a mask, a fabrication designed to please the very people who had dismissed her. True character, as McKee notes, is revealed in the choices we make under pressure. The greater the pressure, the deeper the revelation. Under the immense pressure of repeated professional humiliation, Maya made her choice. She was not just changing her resume, she was changing her identity for the sake of survival. This was her point of no return. She couldn't go back to naively believing her service record was an asset. She was now actively engaged in a deception, a strategic campaign against the system that had rejected her. She attached the new, civilian resume to an application for a senior analyst position at Innovate Analytics, one of the top firms in the country, a place that had likely never even seen her first resume. Her finger trembled slightly as it hovered over the submit button. It felt like abandoning a part of her own soul. But she had to know. She clicked the button. The application vanished into the digital ether, and as she leaned back in her chair, the weight of her choice settled upon her. She had shed her skin, put on a mask, and stepped into a new, more dangerous phase of her war. Now, she would find out if the world preferred the mask to the woman who wore it. In war, there is a concept known as a Pyrrhic victory, a win that comes at such a devastating cost. It feels like a defeat. For Maya Jensen, the aftermath of her decision to erase her military past was a series of such victories, each one validating her strategy while corroding a piece of her soul. Her expectation, after sending out the sanitized resume, was cautiously optimistic. Maybe she thought it would get past a few automated filters. Maybe she would get a polite email acknowledgement. The reality, the gap that ripped open in her world, was far more immediate and unsettling. Her phone, which had been silent for weeks, began to ring. The first call came less than 24 hours after she had submitted the civilian resume to Innovate Analytics. It was their HR department. They were very impressed with her background and wanted to schedule a preliminary phone screening. The next day, 2 more calls came in from other firms that had previously ignored her. By the end of the week, she had 4 interviews lined up. The proof was as stark as it was sickening. The only variable that had changed was the removal of her service. The lie was working. This wasn't a success that brought joy. It brought a cold, metallic taste of anger. She had been right about the prejudice, but being right felt like being punched in the gut. Each phone call was a confirmation that the corporate world didn't want the real her. They wanted the hollowed-out, palatable version she had invented. This sets up the core struggle of Act 2, the progressive complications that arise from a character's initial choice. Maya's new, riskier action was to step into these interviews and perform the lie. The first one was a surreal exercise in restraint. She found herself talking about quarterly reports and synergizing deliverables at the fictional North Star Geospatial. She spoke the language of the boardroom, a dialect she had studied like a foreign tongue. The interviewer nodded, impressed. Maya felt completely disconnected, like she was piloting a drone of herself from a great distance. She was succeeding, but she was disappearing. To understand the depth of this injustice, let's step outside Maya's story for a moment. Think of a master craftsman, a man who has spent 50 years working with oak and cherry, a shipwright who can build a watertight hull with nothing but hand tools and an intuitive understanding of the grain. Imagine him applying for a job at a modern furniture company. The young hiring manager looks at his calloused hands and his simple resume and says, "So you're good with a hammer. That's nice. But do you have experience with our laminated particle board assembly protocols?" The manager sees only the hammer, not the lifetime of wisdom behind it. He dismisses the shipwright's profound, irreplaceable knowledge because it doesn't fit into the neat, sterile boxes of a corporate job description. This is the same condescension Maya faced, the same tragic gap between perceived identity and actual expertise. It is a universal story of mastery being overlooked in favor of mediocrity. This very struggle was crystallized for Maya during a conversation with an old Air Force friend, a man named Leo. He had been a master cryptologist, one of the best. Maya found him working as a shift manager at a big box electronics store, his brilliant mind occupied with scheduling lunch breaks and preventing shoplifting. They sat in a dive bar, the smell of stale beer in the air. "They just don't get it, Maya," Leo said, swirling the ice in his glass. "I told them in my interview I spent 6 years breaking encrypted enemy communications that were vital to national security. You know what the guy asked me? He asked if that meant I was good at solving puzzles, because they had a fun team-building escape room event coming up." He let out a short, bitter laugh. "They see the uniform in your past, and their brains just shut down. They thank you for your service to make themselves feel good, and then they hire the kid with the marketing degree to do a job you could do in your sleep. They want the idea of the hero, the symbol on the wall. They don't want the actual person, with all their messy, real-world, high-stakes experience, sitting in their meetings and making them feel inadequate." That conversation solidified the stakes for Maya. This wasn't just her fight. It was Leo's fight. It was the fight of every veteran whose profound skills were being rendered invisible by the very service that created them. Her personal quest for a job was becoming something more, a mission to prove them all wrong. And it's at this point in many of our lives, when the personal struggle becomes a mission for something larger, that we find a new level of strength. If you've ever felt that fire, fighting not just for yourself, but for your family, your community, or for a principle you hold dear, let us know in the comments below. Sharing those moments of purpose is what builds the community we have here at NX Incredible Stories. Armed with this renewed, if somber, sense of purpose, Maya walked into her next interview at Innovate Analytics. This was the big leagues, and waiting for her was Sarah Vance. Sarah was everything the corporate world celebrated. She was sharp, aggressive, impeccably dressed, and spoke in a rapid-fire burst of industry acronyms. She was the lead analyst, and she carried an air of undisguised intellectual arrogance. As she scanned Maya's fabricated resume, her eyes narrowed. Unlike the others, Sarah wasn't patronizing. She was suspicious. "North Star Geospatial," Sarah said, the name sounding foreign and slightly ridiculous in her mouth. "Can't say I've heard of them. Your work history here is a little thin on public-facing project details." The battle had escalated. This wasn't the lazy condescension of Henderson. This was the focused, predatory scrutiny of a rival. Sarah, the antagonist personified, represented the system at its most formidable. She was the gatekeeper who not only demanded conformity, but was skilled enough to spot an imposter. Maya was deep behind enemy lines now. Her mask was being tested, and her journey through the soulless landscape of her own compromise was about to get much, much harder. The bitter taste of her early success was fading, replaced by the cold fear of imminent exposure. In every great story, the protagonist is eventually pushed toward a confrontation with the antagonistic force that most powerfully represents their central conflict. For Maya Jensen, that force wasn't a person, but an idea. The corrosive belief that her veteran identity was worthless in the civilian world. But that idea had a human face, and its name was Sarah Vance. The final interview at Innovate Analytics was the culmination of Maya's painful compromise. It was set in a top-floor conference room with a panoramic view of the city. a view from a height Maya had once commanded, but now felt impossibly far from. Across the polished mahogany table sat Mr. Davies, the department head, a man with a kind but businesslike demeanor, and next to him, Sarah. The first part of the interview went smoothly. Davies asked broad, strategic questions, and Maya, drawing on her carefully rehearsed and fictional backstory, delivered the polished, confident answers they expected. She was playing the part of the corporate analyst perfectly. She could feel the job offer hovering in the air, the culmination of her strategic deception. The counter idea, that she had to erase herself to succeed, was on the verge of a decisive victory. But Sarah watched her with the intensity of a predator. She wasn't listening to Maya's answers. She was analyzing them, searching for the cracks. While Davies seemed satisfied, Sarah leaned forward, a subtle, challenging glint in her eye. "Let's get granular," Sarah said, cutting through the pleasantries. She began a rapid-fire series of technical questions, drilling down into the specifics of Maya's supposed projects at the fictional North Star. She was testing the limits of the lie. This is where the progressive complications of a story build to a breaking point. Maya was now in a full-blown intellectual firefight, dodging and weaving, parrying questions about non-existent reports and imaginary project timelines. She was drawing on her real analytical skills to defend a fictional history. The strain was immense. Her calm exterior remained, but inside her heart was pounding. She felt the cold sweat of a pilot in a flat spin. One wrong answer, one moment of hesitation, and the entire facade would disintegrate. She almost slipped. Sarah asked about a specific data parsing software, one that would have been standard at the kind of firm Maya claimed to have worked for. "How did you manage the data decay in the Q7 algorithm during your Omega project?" Maya had no idea what the Q7 algorithm was. It was a corporate-specific term, a piece of tribal knowledge she couldn't have. For a split second, her mind went blank. The gap between her feigned reality and the truth yawned before her. This was the moment of exposure. But years of training took over. In the battle space of her drone operations, when a crucial piece of data was missing, you didn't guess. You reframed the problem. "We found the Q7 algorithm was inefficient for the dataset," Maya replied smoothly, her voice betraying no panic. "We bypassed it, developing a proprietary workaround that prioritized signal integrity over processing speed. It was a more direct, if unconventional, solution. It was a brilliant improvisation, plausible, technical, and impossible for Sarah to disprove. It silenced her, at least for a moment." Davies looked impressed by the confidence of her answer. The immediate danger had passed, but the encounter left Maya shaken. She had survived, but the victory felt hollow. She was succeeding because of her ability to lie, not because of her ability to see the truth. The compromise was eating her alive. The interview concluded. Davies smiled warmly. "Thank you, Maya. This has been very impressive. We'll be in touch shortly." As she walked out, Sarah caught her eye. There was no warmth, only a look of cold, grudging respect, the look one skilled adversary gives another. Maya had passed the test, but she knew she hadn't won Sarah over. She had only fought her to a stalemate. This leads us to the final, most difficult choice a protagonist must make: the crisis. The crisis, as defined in classic storytelling, is the ultimate dilemma. It's a choice between two irreconcilable goods, or between the lesser of two evils. For Maya, that choice was no longer about whether she could succeed with her mask on. She had already proven she could. The true crisis was about to be presented: the choice between a secure, successful life lived as a fraud and the terrifying, uncertain path of living as her true self. Back in her apartment that evening, she received an email from Davies. The subject line, "Offer of employment, Innovate Analytics." They were offering her the senior analyst position. The salary was more than she had ever dreamed of. It was everything she had set out to achieve. It was victory. She stared at the email, but she felt no triumph. She felt only the crushing weight of the mask she would have to wear every single day. She would have to continue the lie, building an entire career on a fictional foundation. She would have to listen to people like Sarah talk about their wins and projects, knowing her own were a fabrication. She would have to forever keep her proudest achievements, her truest self, locked away like a state secret. The phone rang. It was Leo. "Hey, you'll never guess what," he said, his voice flat. "They gave the assistant manager job to the kid from the cell phone kiosk. Said he had more customer-facing experience. They offered me a position on the overnight stalking crew. Thanks for my service, right?" Maya closed her eyes. Leo's defeat was a vision of her own future, even in success, a future of being fundamentally undervalued, of having her core worth ignored. The offer letter glowed on her screen. It represented security, wealth, and professional status. It was the good she had been fighting for. But Leo's voice on the phone represented her integrity, her community, her truth. That was the other good. She couldn't have both. To accept the job was to abandon Leo and everyone like him, to agree to the terms of the system that was crushing them. To embrace her truth would mean throwing away this incredible, life-changing opportunity. This was her crisis. The ultimate choice was not made in the boardroom, but right here in the silence of her apartment, with an offer in one hand and her integrity in the other. What she decided next would not just determine her career. It would define her character, once and for all. The final act of a story is its reckoning. It's where the protagonist, having been tested and pushed to their absolute limit, makes a final irreversible choice that reveals their true character and proves the story's central idea. For Maya Jensen, this moment arrived not with a whimper, but with the force of a tectonic shift. After a long, soul-searching night, she made her decision. She replied to Mr. Davies, accepting the offer. But her acceptance came with a condition. She requested one final meeting with him and Sarah to discuss her long-term strategic vision for her role. It was a bold, unconventional request, but Davies, impressed by her ambition, agreed. Maya walked into that conference room for the last time. She was no longer the nervous supplicant or the careful imposter. A new calm had settled over her. The calm of a commander who has chosen her battlefield and is ready for the fight. She was no longer there to ask for a job. She was there to seize a position of power. She sat at the table. Davies smiled, ready to welcome her aboard. Sarah watched her, still suspicious. "Before we finalize the paperwork," Maya began, her voice steady and clear, "I feel I owe you both complete transparency." She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her original resume, the one with the words U.S. Air Force printed proudly at the top. She slid it across the polished table to Davies. "The resume you have on file is a fabrication," she said simply. "This is who I am." Davies stared at the paper, his mind trying to reconcile the two versions. Sarah snatched it, her eyes blazing with a mixture of shock and vindication. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew your story was thin." "My story isn't thin," Maya countered, her voice dropping to a low, powerful register. "My story is something you are not trained to comprehend. I didn't work at a fictional company called North Star. For 4 years, I was a primary sensor operator for the U.S. Air Force's drone program. My job was to fuse intelligence from a dozen platforms to keep American soldiers from dying. The pressure you feel before a quarterly report is the background noise of my average Tuesday. She stood up and walked to the large whiteboard. It still held the faint traces of the ridgeline data problem they had shown her in the last interview. This was her climax, the ultimate irreversible turning point. "You asked me about my analytical approach," she said, picking up a marker. "Let me show you." What followed was not an explanation. It was a demonstration of overwhelming force. She didn't just resolve the problem. She deconstructed their entire approach. She moved with a speed and clarity that left them breathless. "You see this as a data problem," she said, her marker flying across the board. "You are wrong. It is a human problem. Your data isn't telling you what people are buying. It's telling you what they fear. Your analysis is passive. You're reading the past. You should be using it to map the battle space of the future, to anticipate and shape your customers' intent before they are even aware of it themselves." She turned the whiteboard into a masterclass of military-grade strategic analysis applied to corporate data. She used terms like threat vectors, human terrain mapping, and predictive kill chains. But she translated them into the language of market share and consumer behavior so clearly that their power was undeniable. In 5 minutes, she not only solved their problem, but revealed the fundamental inadequacy of their entire analytical philosophy. She hadn't just proven she was qualified for the job. She had proven she was operating on a level they hadn't even known existed. She put the cap on the marker with a decisive click. The room was utterly silent. Davies looked as if he had just seen a ghost. Sarah Vance, the brilliant, arrogant lead analyst, was pale. Her professional certainty had been shattered. She wasn't looking at an imposter. She was looking at a master. This is the moment of absolute, irreversible change. Maya had risked everything, her new job and her old pride, by revealing the truth of her identity. And in doing so, she had established a new reality. Davies finally found his voice. "The offer stands," he said, his tone one of complete awe. "The salary, everything. Name your title. We want you here." Maya looked at him, then at Sarah. She saw the respect in their eyes, the respect she had craved, and she realized in that moment that her unconscious desire had been met. They didn't just want to hire her. They understood her value, and that gave her all the power. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," she said, a small, genuine smile on her face. "It's a generous offer, but I don't think I'm looking for a job anymore." This is the aesthetic emotion of the story's resolution, the powerful and satisfying payoff. It's the final proof of the controlling idea. True professional dignity is achieved not by erasing one's veteran identity, but by demonstrating how its unique disciplines forge unparalleled value. The final scene. A few months later. We are in a clean, buzzing office space. The logo on the glass door reads, Athena Strategic Consulting. The name itself is a statement, the goddess of wisdom and warfare. Inside, Maya is at the head of a conference table, leading a meeting. Her team is a collection of the unseen experts the world had discarded. There is Leo, no longer managing a retail store, but now mapping out a complex logistics network for a Fortune 500 company. We see a former Navy cryptologist, a woman who had been working as a paralegal, now designing unbreakable cybersecurity systems. We see a young Army intelligence NCO, who had been driving for a rideshare service, now brilliantly profiling market trends. They are a team of eagles, finally soaring. They are not asking for a seat at the table. They have built their own. The camera pushes in on Maya's face. She is watching her team, her people. There is no trace of the defeated woman from the first interview. There is only a quiet, profound strength. She is not just an analyst. She is a leader. She has turned the world's ignorance into her greatest strength and transformed an insult into a mission. She has taken the hollow thanks and forged it into a shield, a banner, and a new beginning. The lesson of Maya's story is a powerful one. It teaches us that true value can never be found in conformity. It reminds us that the parts of ourselves we are told to hide, the experiences that make us different, are often the very source of our greatest strength. It is a call to integrity, a challenge to look past the easy labels and see the profound capabilities that lie beneath. It's a reminder that the most powerful thing you can ever be is yourself, undiluted and unafraid. The screen fades to black. Then a title card. Athena Strategic Consulting, Washington, D.C. Inside a sleek office flooded with morning light, Maya stands at the head of a long glass table. Around her, former warriors, once miscast, overlooked, lean in, dissecting a global strategy map. There's Leo, marker in hand, sketching an optimized logistics web that will cut a major corporation's costs in half. Maya doesn't speak. She watches. She leads. On the wall behind her, etched in brushed steel, wisdom, warfare, worth. She never needed the world to see her for what she was. She just needed to build a world that could.